Good. We are continuing our journey through John, and I apologize for going through John a little wonky-tonky. We started in chapter 15, and I knew I wasn't going to get it all, but I went out of town, and so Tom taught the next section, but there's too much in that first section, so we kind of jumped back a little bit. We were going to do that in 1 week, and I decided, you know what, we're going to make it 2 weeks since we're already here, and you'll understand why in a minute. But I wanted to take some time to review some important things because I just feel like it's so foundational, and it's absolutely important for the verse 11 that we're going to be covering today, John 15:11. But the whole issue of Jesus being the true vine. Jesus said, "I am the true vine. My Father is the vine dresser, the gardener." And we've taught through all of that, but it's important to understand that Jesus himself is that vine. The imagery would have been so clear to the disciples, as we've talked about. And Jesus completes what Israel could not. All these references, about 7 or so references to Israel in the Old Testament, God did all that he needed to, but they birthed wild grapes. When they were birthing well in Hosea, they were turning it into idolatry. And so the word picture of Israel being a vine wasn't necessarily a great one, even though they continued to hold to it. But Jesus is saying himself, "I am the true vine," and we are to abide in him, and he will be faithful to abide in us. It's really important for us to remain, not to get sidetracked. And all that we do is birthed out of the reality of abiding in Jesus. Understanding our role and response to Jesus and our relationship with him is key. Our actively abiding, our faithfully abiding, our total trusting in him that he will lead into a place that will be bearing fruit as he leads and as he sees fit. Kind of went word nerdy last week on the word abide. It's in the notes from last week. You can go online and find it. Kind of looking at how Jesus in these 7 verses, uses abide in 6 different verb forms. And it really helps us to understand what that actually looks like. In John 15:5, "Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing." So how do we abide? We do what comes naturally, as much as a branch does what comes naturally in abiding in a tree or in a vine. We stay, we remain, we get fed, we respond to the pruning that happens so that we will bear more fruit. But we stay put. I think that's the important piece. We stay put. This thing of believing always is undergirding all of this that John teaches throughout the whole gospel. Our essence of believing is found in our abiding, staying put. And we will find sustaining in that place. We will find identity in that place. We will bear fruit in that place. Because bearing fruit is something that naturally comes when we're part of the vine. And you know what? There's no other way. There's no other way to bear fruit. And we bear fruit, we don't make fruit. Does that make sense? The tree doesn't make fruit, it just bears fruit. Because it's abiding in the vine, the branch bears fruit. And it is for God's glory. By this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. You know, it's interesting. I didn't cover this last week, but you know, whenever you're going over passages like this is why I love teaching through books, because you get the flow of what is being taught here. But I was pondering this, probably because it's, the World Series just finally finished up. First time ever really watching it, first time really caring, because of how far the Mariners went, obviously. But we don't praise the branches for the fruit that it bears. We praise the gardener, right? The gardener is the one that gets the awards for award-winning wines or the award-winning grapes, award-winning apples. It's the gardener, it's the pruner, it's the tender of the garden that gets the praise, because they are the ones who help create the environment and provide the right nutrients, all that's needed for it to bear fruit. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that in the light of the World Series, because we tend to give credit to the branch. We tend to give credit to the winners, and we love winners. I mean, it's really interesting following the broadcasters. You know, I remember with A-Rod and Derek Jeter and all that, just at the beginning of the Toronto series, right? And they're predicting, Toronto's going to win in 4 or 5. I mean, this is going to be, they're clearly the better team, and all of a sudden Seattle takes the 2 first games. I don't know why, I just got goosebumps again, because it was awesome. And all of a sudden the announcers are like, well, we've got the dumper, we've got all these, it's like big dumper, not the dumper, whatever. But it's all these things, and all of a sudden now they're praising the Mariners. They kind of got off the J train for a while. Not the J-Rod train, but the Blue Jays train, whatever. And so it's just interesting. And then they switch back and forth and back and forth. And of course the Dodgers are going to win. They've got superior $1 billion they've spent over the next however many years on their 4 pitchers, 4 of their pitchers. I don't know. Isn't that interesting? People just following, because we just get that way. We get fixated on people. We get fixated on personalities. And the gospel is so countercultural. And that's kind of why I'm parking here for just a moment, not only because it's foundational for verse 11, but it's really important for us in our hearts and in our minds of what it means to abide, what it means to remain, what it means to stay. Because we don't take credit for what hangs on the end of the branches. God gets all the credit. I have enjoyed, I don't know if you know who Forrest Frank is, this worship guy. It's kind of hit viral on all the social media platforms or whatever. But he has been doing worship for a while. It was interesting because he boycotted the Dove Awards. Not really boycotted. He just said, I'm not going to the Dove Awards. And it was one of those things. It's like, I'm not going to, how can I receive an award for a song that Jesus gave me for Jesus' glory? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that I would take the credit for what God gave me. And I love his humility, because it's genuine humility. I just like the guy. I think he's the real deal. And I appreciate his sincerity. But he was just like, and he had written a song, I think maybe at the time of the Dove Awards last year when he did attend, and he goes, felt really awkward. So he writes this song as he's sitting on the floor in his kid's room or something with a guitar saying, I don't need an award. And it was like, I just really appreciated that. Because he understands and understood that God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit is at work in us to bear through us what brings him glory, what bears fruit for his glory. Because we give the glory to the gardener. My Father is the gardener. And so when we came to verse 11, I had it in my notes to cover last week, and as I was praying through verse 11, it's like, gosh, now that the holiday season has begun, I don't know what you believe about eggnog, but I think it's open season. But this time of year can also be a time of great stress. It can be a time of pain, to be honest. A lot of pressure, like, are we going to do it right? Or who's coming, who's not coming? Why are they coming? Or where are we going to be? And even if it's good stress, it's still stress. And there's stuff that can happen this time of year that's pretty unique. When I've done marriage counseling, oftentimes I will come to this holiday season because that's when it kind of comes to a head, right? All the pressures, all the expectations of the husband side, all the expectations of the wife side and the family things and all those things because the holidays kind of bring that all out. So, choosing to abide continually brings something that is a powerful fruit that we get to enjoy. We're not just talking about fruit that we bear, but fruit that is in us that is so powerful, and it comes down to one of my favorite words, and it's the word joy. How great my joy. Joy, joy, joy. Oh, gosh. You guys clearly aren't there in your head yet. But it will come. It will come. Verse 15, or chapter 15, verse 11 says, "These things I have spoken to you, that my may be in you, and that your may be full." May be full. May that be true of us. Not just for the holiday season, but may that be true of us in the existence that we live in as we abide in the vine. May there be joy. I'm not talking about happiness. Happiness comes and goes, right? I remember how happy I would be when things were going my way, and how happy I would be when I won my game or won my wrestling match, whatever, how happy I would be. But you know what? There's going to be another event coming, right? Or the end of the season came and I was sad about that. It was always cyclical. It was always circumstantial. I used to say, well, I guess I'm saying it now, happiness depends on happenings, but joy depends on Jesus. So we're talking about something different here, something deeper here. These are things that come from being from abiding in the true vine, from abiding in Jesus. Knowing that from this place comes pruning, and also comes obedience and His commands as part of abiding in His love. So there is these things that Jesus talks about. These things I have spoken to you. These things. The things that come from abiding. The things that come from obedience and pruning and abiding in His love. That my joy. That my joy. Jesus is speaking this. A joy that Jesus walked in. A joy that Jesus lived out in perfect relationship with His Father. Jesus is imparting something that He had and would always have. Jesus is imparting to them something He had. And always had. And always will have. This is something that Jesus was giving them. And I think that's really important. Because, I could give you great advice on how to program a computer. Well, I guess we have AI now. But my advice wouldn't be very good because I know nothing about programming computers. Not much more about AI. But I tell you, Jesus was giving what He had, that my joy may be in you. This word joy, chara, is the word in the Greek. It's a noun that means gladness, delight, or deep-seated contentment. Deep-seated contentment. And I was kind of pondering this as I was prepping this, and I don't know that I would necessarily call it like some sort of irrefutable truth. But I was pondering the fact that it was His joy in Him and not His joy on them. Like, interesting, in and on. So then I did a little bit of a deep dive on verses of joy on, and there's really no reference anywhere of joy on. Joy on could be considered kind of temporary, kind of like the heat that comes to your skin, or wet or dry. It's on, but it's temporary. Joy in is something else. And there's like 56 in the ESV anyways. There's like 56 references to joy in. Like, oh, there's something in this. The psalmist says in Psalm 4, "You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound." Psalm 16:11 says, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is" what? Fullness of joy. I like that a lot. "And at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Shout for joy in the Lord." Psalm 33. O you righteous, praise befits the upright. And I love the story of when Mary came to Elizabeth, visiting Elizabeth as we're coming on to the Christmas season. And as she greets her, all of a sudden, John the Baptist, soon to be, was probably baptized right there in the Spirit. There was her womb leaped with joy. She says, "For behold, when the sound of your greeting came to my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy." And I love this blessing that Paul gives in Romans 15. "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope." Jesus will be speaking more about joy in John 16 and John 17 in this teaching that Jesus, this long, extended, personal, intimate teaching that Jesus gives. But a key fruit that comes from abiding in Jesus is joy. I think that's really important for us today. I remember in the early days of Christianity, I was a little bit exuberant. I don't know if you knew that about me. I was a little exuberant, and I remember coming into these places, and people would be kind of like, they're kind of wondering about my piety, because you're in church. You're in church. I didn't realize that seriousness was fruit of the Holy Spirit, but apparently it was for them. And it's like, no. Joy. How great my joy. How do we walk in His joy? Remember, joy depends on Jesus. And this gift that Jesus gives, because some of you are maybe thinking kind of the same things that I think when I talk about joy. It's like, yeah, but life sucks sometimes. Can I just be honest? Life's difficult sometimes. And it feels like just as you get to that wave, you get on it and you hit the beach. Like, as soon as our baby sleeps for 5 hours the next night, not so great. It just happens. We've been getting the daily reports from our daughter and little Lucy. But joy isn't like that. Joy is completely something that comes from abiding in the Lord. Do you know that joy is nothing you can fake? We can fake happiness. Like, how you doing? I'm great. I'm doing great. I'm great. Have you ever had anybody say that? How you doing? Great. And they're working hard on faking it. It ain't working. You're like, no. People may try to fool you. People may even fool themselves. But joy is not a temporary feeling, because joy is not something you can create. Joy is not something you can create. I say that again. Joy is not something you can create. Joy is also a gift given, not a trophy awarded. Joy is a gift given. That's what makes joy so special. And that's why abiding in the vine, remaining in Jesus, and we've talked about that quite a bit, and I've just reviewed quite a bit, but it's so important for us to understand the source of our joy, even in the midst of horrible diagnosis, even in the midst of bad news, of friends passing away, as I heard about recently, a teenager that was killed in a car accident. How do you maintain any level of joy when such an it's just not fair? When unfair things happen, how do you maintain an attitude of joy? And I'm not talking about coming in, oh, brother, God causes all things to work for the good for those who love Him. I'm not talking about like fake. I'm talking about deep, abiding, real, sustaining joy. Because it's a gift. It's not a trophy. And joy, this joy is a reflection of the very nature of God. That's why we get to reflect joy, because we're abiding in the joy giver. That's why we get to bear life, bear fruit that has seeds, fruit that has more fruit in it, because we abide in the abundant Creator that hasn't stopped creating. We abide in Him. And the benefit that we get in the midst of this, that my joy may be in you, that your joy may be full. My joy may be in you. Your joy may be full. I love this word, full. To make complete in every particular, to render perfect. Filled to where there is no room for anything more. And I love this idea of cram-packed, full. Now let me take you on a little journey to Chuck E. Cheese. I was 16. I celebrated my 16th birthday at Chuck E. Cheese. Part of it mostly because my niece was turning 3 and we were celebrating her 3rd birthday, but I went too. One thing you could do at Chuck E. Cheese on your birthday was to reach into this big bucket and get a mitt full of tokens that you could use in all of the video games, right? And so Danielle, my cute little 3-year-old, made sure she went first because I'm just that kind of guy. She reached in. She was born on my 13th birthday, by the way. Did I mention that? So we have the same birthday. So she reached in and grabbed. It's like, oh, that's a lot. I was 16. I reached down into that bucket, and I went like this. I got a lot of coins. I was playing Star Wars. Y'all clear, kid. You remember that when you got the final Death Star and you dropped it in? I had so many coins. People hated me. That was my game all night long. I even shared some, but I'm telling you, when I think of my joy may be full, I picture reaching into that thing, going all the way to the bottom, and just kind of like this. And the one holding the bucket was like, really? So everything I can take out with one scoop, right? Yeah, okay, I'm doing it. And so I might have even had leftovers, that my joy may be full, and I have that picture in my mind. The meniscus on the top of a glass. I remember this from chemistry. You could put even more in a glass than it can hold. Do you know that? How many of you know that? Right? You see the meniscus of the glass. It's just this bubble. You barely touch it and it goes, it just, no, it doesn't. It splashes, whatever. It comes out. But it's this idea, there is no room for anything else. That my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. One of the most amazing passages of Jesus' teaching ever is right here. His heart is so clear for us that we would lack nothing, that we would overflow, that your joy may be full, that his joy and his gladness may be in us. This word at the end, because joy is a noun, but that's made full. Your joy may be made full is in this tense in the Greek that's saying, this is the cool thing. It's like, it's in the aorist tense, as we've talked about, something that happens with ongoing repercussions. But it's a gift. It's in the aorist passive subjunctive, which means that this thing that Jesus gives has ongoing ramifications. But in this passive sense, it's given to us. It's given to us. It's not something we have to fake. It's not something that we have to create. It's something that comes, potentially, that's where the subjunctive comes in. It potentially comes because we're abiding in the vine. That's why abiding is so important. Stay there. Jesus isn't going to ever leave you or forsake you. It's so important for us to remember. Because he's faithful. Always faithful. We're the fickle. We're the ones that kind of, the old saying, it's hard being a living sacrifice. We're consider ourselves as living sacrifices because we're always climbing off the altar. But for us to remain, to stay, to trust, to abide in him. This is the heart of Jesus for us. It's a powerful response. And then I started pondering the whole idea, and we'll kind of close with this, but the idea of of what is the result of joy. There's another word that comes from a similar root. Our response of joy is to rejoice. Rejoice. I could go off on some sort of made-up words of, that we get joy, so we rejoy. But I would never do that because that would be improper hermeneutics. But we rejoice. We are in this place. These references of rejoice in Him. That's where the 59 references come in, actually. I quoted it earlier, but it's in rejoice. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we see this instruction that Paul gives. And in the understanding of abiding in the vine, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full, Paul can give us this instruction in 1 Thessalonians 5 to rejoice always. Because if you see that word, you're just like, he didn't drive in the traffic I drove in today. He didn't just have to go to Costco today. Had enough. Rejoice always comes because His joy is in us, and His joy doesn't ever stop. The source of His joy won't end. Our privilege, not just our responsibility, but our privilege is to abide. And how can we rejoice always? Because we have Jesus' joy in us. The writer of Hebrews says this in Hebrews 12, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, we're not alone. Let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings to us so closely or so easily entangles us, some of the versions say. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross. Can you just stop there for a moment with me? The joy that was set before Him endured the cross. The joy that was set before Him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. We also know in Galatians 5 that joy is a fruit of the Spirit. It's this process that comes to us because we walk in a place, we live in a place of abiding in Him. There's another place that expresses great joy. And you know where that joy is expressed? In heaven. I love this in Luke 15. Jesus says, just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Heaven is full of joy when someone else is abiding in the vine. Heaven is full of joy when someone turns their face towards Jesus. Paul says in Corinthians that there's a veil that remains. I know he's talking about the people of Israel. I think there's a bigger picture in that when we turn our face towards Jesus, there's a veil that's removed. And we get to have intimacy with Jesus. Powerful relationship with our God. So important, so good. So my question for you today, same questions I ask myself, by the way. Am I abiding? Where's my source of joy? In the midst of it all, when things are really great, when things are not so great, where's my deep-rooted sense of joy? Where is Jesus' joy in my life? Do I even rely on Jesus? Do I even trust in Jesus? Do I even believe? I think most of you are in the already convinced crowd. There may be some of you that are wrestling with it. Maybe some of you are re-wrestling with it because of stuff that's gone on in your life. It's like, yeah, I know what the church says, but gosh, I don't know that I've really abounded in joy lately. Worship team, could you come forward? This is where this word becomes really a deep-seated part of who we are. Not because we're more sincere, but because we're more surrendered. I love that joy is not a trophy awarded, it's a gift given. It's His joy. It may come out in different ways, may be exposed in different ways, may be tested in all kinds of ways. But may we be a people of great joy. Maybe some of you need to make a decision today. Maybe there's some joy that is yet to be had in you. You've been wrestling with the whole idea of who Jesus is and what He's done. Maybe you've got some questions. Maybe you're ready. I don't know. But I do know that the invitation is there.